What if I told you that one of the most beloved MMOs of all time might have been completely different? Maybe even the biggest MMORPG in the world? Well, that would be if it weren't for one massive game casting a shadow over an entire genre. Today we're diving into an alternate history, a world where World of Warcraft never dominated the MMO landscape, and well, in that world, The Lord of the Rings Online might have become the king of MMORPGs. Welcome to a world where a very different king was crowned. Back in the early 2000s, MMOs were booming, there was no doubt about that. Games like EverQuest, Ultima Online, and Star Wars Galaxies created living worlds where players could log in and lose themselves for hours. Then, in 2004, World of Warcraft launched, and to say the least, it absolutely exploded. At its peak, it had over 12 million subscribers, shaping the entire MMO industry for years to come. But in 2007, another MMO launched, The Lord of the Rings Online. Backed by one of the most iconic fantasy IPs ever created, that is without a doubt. LOTRO brought players directly to Middle-earth. It had deep storytelling, an incredible music system, and of course, the chance to stand shoulder to shoulder with Aragorn, Gandalf, and of course, the rest of the Fellowship. So with an IP so strong and momentum, what was wrong? What was the problem? Well, by the time LOTRO arrived, World of Warcraft had already set the standard, captured the market, and trained millions of players to expect a certain kind of MMO experience. Players of World of Warcraft just wouldn't have appreciated what made Lord of the Rings Online so special, and I guess that leads us on to our next point as to what made Lord of the Rings Online truly stand out. Well, let's not beat around the bush here, it's definitely the storytelling first. LOTRO was one of the first MMOs to make the story feel like an actual novel that you were part of. Each quest tied into an overarching war against Sauron and his evil forces. Instead of just focusing on random fetch quests, you actually felt like a character woven into Tolkien's history, narrative, and tapestry. Then there is the world itself, Middle-earth. It wasn't just a map, it was a living place. The Shire felt cozy, Moria was intimidating and vast, and well, Rohan truly felt like the land of the Horse Lords. It went ever on. We were introduced to the music system, a system that let LOTRO players actually compose and play music in-game. By today's standards, that's not that impressive, but back then, this was absolutely unheard of. Entire player bands would hold concerts in the likes of Bree or Rivendell, and the sense of community creativity was something that most MMOs just never could match. There was one point, however, that truly made Lord of the Rings Online stand out to a lot of people who were not just interested in the IP, and that was the idea that this game would focus more on immersion over flashy artwork. Whilst WoW leaned into an exaggerated art form and quick action, LOTRO definitely felt slower, more grounded and more immersive. It was very much about the journey just as much as it was about the combat. But realistically, none of this really mattered, because here's the thing, and we've addressed this already, LOTRO released into a gaming world already defined by WoW. Players had just simply gotten used to WoW's fast leveling, colourful graphics and social systems. Compared to that, LOTRO seemed slower, heavier and definitely more niche. On top of that, the sheer cultural dominance of WoW meant every other MMO was judged against it. This wasn't just specific to Lord of the Rings Online. Even games that were wildly successful by normal standards like LOTRO, which had a real strong and loyal fan base, were just seen as WoW clones, or even worse, the game you play when you're not playing WoW. But it does beg the question, what if WoW hadn't dominated? What if the MMO market was still fragmented and waiting for the right game to take over? Let's imagine for a second an alternate timeline. In a world without WoW's dominance, let's say LOTRO launches in 2007 as the big MMO, the event, the launch, the release that everyone is looking forward to. Well, with WoW out of the way, LOTRO all of a sudden has some major advantages over the rest of the competition. Let's start with the obvious, the IP advantage. Everybody knows Tolkien. From casual movie fans to hardcore book readers, Middle-earth is instantly recognizable. That gives, at least in my opinion, LOTRO the kind of mainstream reach that only WoW achieved in our own world. Let's not get it twisted as well, player expectations would be drastically different if WoW was not around. Without World of Warcraft setting the bar for speed and accessibility, players will be, and probably would be, more patient with slower leveling, more complex systems, and immersive world building. LOTRO's pacing wouldn't then be seen as a flaw, it would just simply become the norm. Now, whilst World of Warcraft's classic component was definitely a lot slower, this pacing has picked up a lot as time has progressed. A very strong string in Lord of the Rings Online's bow, if WoW was, out of the picture, would be the idea that role-playing would very much be at the forefront of this game. Instead of being a niche corner, a niche focus of MMOs, roleplay and immersion could have been the industry standard, and where better to do it than in Middle-earth. Imagine if every big MMO after LOTRO started to introduce the music systems, the deep customizable housing systems, and community-driven events. I feel like even now there are a lot of titles that could definitely learn something from Lord of the Rings Online, because the way it executes these components of an MMO is done really, really well, and has been done well for many years. A massive strength that has been hidden in WoW's shadow for Lord of the Rings Online is the power of its expansions. Instead of being breezed past by the Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King, LOTRO's expansions like the Mines of Moria, Siege of Mirkwood, and Riders of Rohan would become genre-defining, and in my opinion, they are some of the best expansions out there currently to date. The Mines of Moria is fantastic to play through on your first occasion. Each new chapter of Tolkien's world would dominate gaming news the way that WoW's expansions did in our world, and they'd feel even more special because they have the IP behind them. I've always really liked the idea of people conversing about Lord of the Rings Online the same way they would with WoW. When they say to their friends, hey, are you logging on to WoW tonight? I often envision people talking about logging into Middle-earth and all the places that they're going to go and explore with their friends when it was all fresh. There's just something inherently cool about that. In this very timeline that we're talking about, LOTRO isn't just a successful MMO. I mean, it is successful in its own way currently, but let's say it reshapes the entire genre. Instead of chasing WoW's formula, future MMOs would chase Tolkien's formula, Turbine's formula, and then, of course, SSGs. I truly believe we may have then seen more games focusing on more immersive storytelling, roleplay systems, and living worlds, rather than just raids and gear treadmills. I've always enjoyed the idea of an MMO kind of feeling like a second home, a place to live in, not just grind. This sort of feeling would have been really nice to have seen gone more mainstream rather than just niche. I feel like there are a lot of games now that we just clock in and clock out of as if it's a job, whereas for me, I appreciate these videos are going to come across with some form of bias, but I really truly do feel in my heart of hearts that Lord of the Rings Online has a place you can call a second home. It's just got that feel to it, which I don't really feel in many other games. So to summarize, while LOTRO never became the king of MMOs in our world, it did pretty good for its run-ins, of course, and still does, but it does still remain a hidden gem, and in my opinion, one of the richest and most lovingly crafted virtual worlds ever made to date. But I guess I can't just ignore the part of my brain that kind of hopes in another timeline it might not have been hidden at all. It might have been the MMO that everyone remembers, and hey, you watching, it may have been the game that you remember. It may have been the game that you loved over and above WoW, and if that's the case, I would love to hear from you. This video is of course not to discredit WoW as well. I feel like what the developers did, what Blizzard did back in the day, is phenomenal, absolutely groundbreaking, and to anyone that still plays World of Warcraft, this is not a dig at you at all. So yeah, let's leave it there. What do you guys think? Would LOTRO have ruled the MMO world without WoW standing in its way, or was WoW's dominance just inevitable? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.